Yoda's species is far more powerful than any other in the Star Wars galaxy, and yet it remains the one species no one can fully explain. It has no name, no known home world, and a past the story has never filled in. Every single known member was a powerful Force user, something no other species has ever come close to matching. A small green figure raising one hand to lift a sunken X-wing free of a swamp is only the surface of it. For most of the galaxy, that kind of connection is rare. The Force is the invisible energy field that the Jedi draw on, the ancient order of peacekeepers who train for years to sense and shape it. Even among the Jedi, real strength takes decades to build, so one gifted little master could be brushed aside as a lucky exception. Then a second one appeared. She sat on the Jedi High Council during the invasion of Naboo, the ruling body made up of the Order's wisest members. Small, silent, and easy to overlook beside the towering figures around her, Yaddle was almost as old as Yoda himself. She was not a footnote, but the second clue. In nearly every other species, the Force is a gift handed to a scattered few. Their shared gift was only the first thing that set them apart. In the canon guide, Star Wars: The Complete Visual Dictionary, the Grandmaster is named as part of a rarely seen species. Every known member has been a Force user, and every one of them served the Jedi. That held true long before Yoda was even born. In older stories once told as part of the expanded universe, now labeled Legends, and set outside the official canon, the same kind of beings kept surfacing at the height of Jedi power. In the game Knights of the Old Republic, a master named Vandar Takari led a Jedi enclave thousands of years before the Clone Wars, trusted for his calm judgment and his gift for sensing danger early. Other tales from that era carried the same picture. One of his kind, Oteg, rose to Jedi Master and Fleet Commander. Another, a Jedi Knight named Minch, struck down a fallen dark side warrior on his own, centuries before the old Master ever took his seat on the Council. The eras and the settings changed, but the result never did. In this species, power in the Force ran through everyone, as ordinary among them as breathing. But being able to touch the Force is only half of it. These beings also had something no human Jedi ever would: time, and centuries of it. The proof of that looked nothing like the power at all. In the canon TV series The Mandalorian, a creature of the same species appeared in the care of a lone gunfighter. The public quickly nicknamed him Baby Yoda, and he looked the part, with small ears, wide eyes, and tiny hands reaching up from a floating crib. But he was no baby. He was 50 years old. A human being is middle-aged at 50. Grogu's kind ages so differently that they spend their first 50 years as helpless infants. So at that same age, he could not speak, needed to be carried, and slept in a crib. They reach full adulthood only around 100, and from there, they can live for many centuries. For a Jedi, that single fact changes the math. A human student gets a few short decades. The Grand Master had 800 years. By his own account in the canon film The Empire Strikes Back, the small Green Master trained Jedi across 8 of those centuries. When he finally reached his end, he was 900 years old. Yaddle was younger, and still ancient by any normal measure, 477 at the time of the Naboo crisis. So this was never one lifetime of practice stacked against an enemy's single lifetime. It was 10 lifetimes folded into one mind. Each insight, technique, and mistake was kept and sharpened over spans of time most beings never come close to living. Centuries of practice can turn a gifted student into something the galaxy has never measured. When the old Master finally showed what that looked like, he did it by catching lightning in his hands. The moment came in the canon film Attack of the Clones. Count Dooku, a Jedi Master who had abandoned the Order and turned to the dark side, stood across a hangar from the small green figure. The Count raised both hands, and white lightning tore across the room. Most fighters would have been finished right there. Yoda simply lifted a hand and caught it. Dooku, secretly the Dark Lord Darth Tyrannus, was throwing Force Lightning, one of the signature weapons of the Sith, the ancient order of dark side users who have hunted the Jedi across the ages. The Grand Master absorbed the first bolt, then a second, holding the raw energy without harm until the fallen Jedi gave up on lightning altogether and drew his blade. It was the same control the ancient master had shown years earlier. On the swamp world of Dagobah, a young pilot named Luke Skywalker had crashed his X-Wing into the bog. Certain it was too big and too heavy to move, he had given up on it. Yoda closed his eyes and lifted the entire machine free, then set it down gently on solid ground. Size, he taught, meant nothing to the Force. His hardest test came at the very end of the Clone Wars, and this time the outcome was not so clean. By then, the Order was being driven to its end, and Palpatine, the Supreme Chancellor who was secretly the Dark Lord Darth Sidious, had seized total control. In the canon film Revenge of the Sith, the Old Master faced him in the empty Senate chamber. He matched the new Emperor blade for blade, and turned aside as lightning at first. Then, the sheer weight of the dark side overwhelmed him, and he was driven into hiding. He did not win. Many read his retreat as a hard piece of wisdom, a recognition that the shadow had grown too strong to beat head-on, and that survival mattered more than pride. The story leaves that as a reading, not a settled fact. Either way, the Old Master walked away and lived. There was one more thing almost no Jedi can manage. In the canon animated TV series The Clone Wars, Yoda learned to hold on to himself after his life ended, keeping his mind and his voice within the Force instead of simply fading away. Only a rare few Jedi ever managed the same, but every one of those feats belonged to a master with 800 years of training behind him. The most startling proof of what this species truly is came from someone who had been trained by no one at all. Later, the lone gunfighter who had taken in the 50-year-old child was cornered by a mudhorn, a huge horned beast the size of a small vehicle, charging hard enough to trample them both. A Jedi still in training had strained and failed to move that same starfighter. This untrained infant lifted a charging beast twice his size, on pure instinct. The young one raised both hands. The mudhorn froze in the air, with his legs still kicking, and then it dropped. The effort knocked him out cold for hours. No master had trained him, and no one had shown him how to reach for that power. It came to him anyway. His power kept emerging in forms that even seasoned Jedi rarely managed. When a companion of the gunfighter lay near death from a deep wound, the child pressed close and healed him, closing a wound that should have been beyond saving. Later, when a soldier turned a stream of fire on the group, the young one caught the flames in his open hands and pushed them back. Years after that, he would raise a shield of pure force to guard the gunfighter from an explosion that tore a warship apart around them. His instincts were not always gentle. During a friendly arm wrestling contest, the foundling briefly closed a force grip around a warrior's throat before the adults pulled him off. The same choking power the dark side is known for, used with no grasp of what it meant. For a creature with no teacher, that raised a simple question of where he had come from. The infant had been raised at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, the Order's home on the galaxy's capital world, as one of the many younglings in its care. Then came the night the Jedi fell. On the same night the entire Order was betrayed and scattered, one child of Yoda's species was carried out of the temple in a stranger's arms. As clone soldiers turned on their Jedi generals and stormed the halls, a Jedi named Kelleran Beck fought his way through them, took the child, and escaped the planet aboard a waiting ship. The years that followed are left almost blank. Still, the young one lived, carrying the same power that runs through his whole kind. One member of the species mastered an art so dangerous that the Jedi Council came close to forbidding it outright. If you want more Star Wars deep dives like this one, a quick subscribe means the next one always reaches you first. That art belonged to the quietest member of the species the galaxy ever knew. Yaddle rarely spoke. On the Council, she came across as calm, patient, gentle almost to a fault. Yet behind that stillness sat some of the most dangerous abilities in the entire Order. The technique is called Morocro. A user could slow another being's body from the inside, easing the heartbeat and breathing down until the target sank into a deep sleep, or a frozen, suspended state, or simply stopped. The Jedi called it the Touch of Death, and the Council allowed only a tiny handful to practice it. Yaddle was one of them. The dark side built its whole tradition on power over life and its end. Yet no dark side user is recorded reaching for the one touch that could quietly switch it off. It stayed with the Jedi. Yaddle is remembered for holding that knowledge, never for using it, a power the Council trusted only to its steadiest hands. Even the gentlest of her kind could hold what the rest of the galaxy would never touch. But one other species could touch the Force just as completely as Yoda's kind. If they were not alone in that, the real question becomes what set them apart at all. That other species had no eyes at all. The Miraluka look almost human, except where a human has eyes, they have smooth skin. They do not see light. They sense the world entirely through the Force, reading the shapes and living things around them without ever opening an eye. Every single Miraluka is born able to touch the Force without exception. On the surface, the Miraluka look like the one species that matches Yoda's people outright. Nearly everything known about the Miraluka belongs to Legends, set down in the old reference book, The New Essential Guide to Alien Species. In canon, they appear only in passing. Within those older stories, a Miraluka could sense the Force, but sensing is not the same as commanding it. That is a very different thing from lifting a starship, absorbing lightning, or sitting on the Jedi High Council as one of its strongest members. Every known member of Yoda's species did the second kind of thing. This may not be the only species where every member can touch the Force, but it may be the only one where every known member became a powerful Jedi. A precise midi-chlorian count in the 17,000s has trailed the Grand Master for years. It traces back to a fan list, not to any canon or legend source. Numbers were never what set the species apart anyway. The galaxy's other giants were lone standouts of otherwise ordinary species. Palpatine, the most powerful Dark Lord of his age, was human. His own master, Darth Plagueis, was a Mune, a tall, thin species known across the galaxy for banking and finance. Anakin, the boy with the record count, was human too. Each one of them was a remarkable soul born among billions of ordinary ones. With Yoda's people, that same level of power seems to have been where everyone started. No rival species truly matches them, which leaves the one question the galaxy never got to answer: where these creatures came from, and why no one was ever allowed to find out. There is a single image of this species that was never meant to survive. It appeared on a collectible card printed in the mid-1990s. The creature showed a group of the creatures kneeling in worship before a tall statue of one of their own, heads bowed like worshippers before an idol. Almost as soon as that card was printed, it was pulled and ordered out of circulation. The company behind it recalled the entire run on orders from above. A few copies escaped before they could all be gathered up, which is the only reason anyone knows the image ever existed. It was buried for the same reason the rest of the species remains a blank. George Lucas decided very early that these beings would never be explained. He later admitted plainly that he had never worked out where the old master came from or even settled on a name for his kind. Yoda was meant to be a mystery who walks into the story, teaches, and walks back out, carrying no background at all. Long after, Jon Favreau, the creator of The Mandalorian, held to exactly the same rule. He described Yoda as a character who was always wrapped in mystery, remembered for what he stood for rather than where he came from, and said that this was precisely why so many people became fascinated by the small newcomer of the same kind. The not knowing was never an accident, it was the plan. That plan held everywhere. Lines written for the films that would have touched on the species were cut, and even then, they only ever called it Yoda's species, never a real name. The old expanded universe ran for decades and dreamed up thousands of worlds and peoples, yet it never named this one and never found its home world. When the first Alien guidebook finally tried to include the creatures, it had to list them with no species name and no world of origin, an empty space where every other entry had answers. Every other alien in the galaxy could be looked up, placed, and explained. This one was hidden on purpose for more than 40 years. And that single choice is what turned a small puppet into a legend. The strangest part had nothing to do with the Force at all. A small puppet with no name and no home world became one of the most recognized faces on the planet, a creature millions adored without knowing the first real fact about where it came from. It returns to the buried image on that recall card. A statue is what a people builds to be remembered, and this was the only glimpse of theirs the galaxy was ever allowed. None of it works alone. Every known member can touch the Force. Each one lives for centuries, folding lifetimes of mastery into one mind. The power runs so deep that an untrained infant can do what trained knights struggle to manage. The origin of all of it was sealed away on purpose. so that no bloodline, no formula, and no map to a home world could ever shrink it into something ordinary. The card showed the monument, and never the people who built it. Yoda's people were the only ones for whom command of the Force was simply what they were, but that mystery was hiding something far darker than a lost name or a missing home world. For all their power, this species was already walking towards its own extinction, an end that not even the strongest of them saw coming or could stop. So watch this video to find out.